Since times immemorial, the humanity have built impressive monuments that defy logic and the understanding, pyramids that resist the past of the time, temples that seem touched by the hand of the gods, and impregnable fortresses. However, some of the more enigmatic constructions are not in the pages of the conventional archaeology, but in a book that has been studied for millennia, the Bible. Among their sacred stories, we find mentions of buildings that seem impossible for the time in which they were supposedly built. A gigantic ship capable of housing all the species of the planet. Walls impenetrable that fell without a single battle. A temple covered in gold that shone like the sun. A tower that defied the gods' will, and a sanctuary rebuilt in half of the conflict to become in the heart of a nation. But here arises the big question. Are these constructions real? Can they, the science and the archaeology, corroborate their stories? Or are they just religious myths passed down throughout the time? Today, we will delve into 5 of the most impressive buildings mentioned in the Bible, exploring the mysteries that surround and confront their stories with the historical evidence. Are they tests of the divine intervention or simply symbolic narratives? The answer could change our perception of the past. Now we begin with one of the most famous structures of the history, Noah's Ark, a vessel of colossal proportions that, according to the Bible, saved the humanity of the biggest catastrophe of all times. The story of Noah's Ark is one of the best known in the Bible. According to in the book of Genesis, God warned Noah about a flood that would devastate the earth, and he ordered the construction of a gigantic boat to save his family, already a couple of each animal species. But here an inevitable question arises. How Noah was able, without tools advanced neither knowledge of naval engineering, to build a ship of such dimension. The scriptures describe the ark with exact measurements. 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high, which is approximately 135 meters long, 22 meters wide, and 13 meters high. Others words, a modern cargo ship or a 4-story building. For the time in the one that was supposed to be built, similar boat, it turned out unthinkable. Wood, without metal reinforcements nor sealing technologies advanced, tends to deform and leak water. However, some theoretical studies have suggested that Noah could have used a combination of resistant woods and natural resins to waterproof the structure and maintain his buoyancy. Throughout the years, archaeologists and researchers have tried to find physical evidence of the existence of the ark. According to the tradition, the boat ran aground in Mount Ararat, in the current Turkey, when the waters from the flood descended. In 1959, a Turkish pilot captured aerial images of a formation, rocky with a silhouette surprisingly similar to that of a ship. Decades later, in 2010, a group of Christian explorers, he stated, having found remains of petrified wood in the area, which generated a great debate in the archaeological community. However, to date, there is no proof conclusive that Noah's Ark actually existed. Many historians believe that the history of the flood could have based in previous events, such as the flood from the Black Sea ago thousands of years, which could have seemed like a global cataclysm for the civilizations nearby. Others suggest that the biblical narrative has roots in Mesopotamian stories even older, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, which also mentions a great flood and a saving ark. But for the believers, the true importance Noah's Ark does not lie in his physical existence, but in his message it conveys, a symbol of faith, obedience and salvation in times of crisis. However, Noah's Ark is not the only biblical construction that defies logic and the science. In her next chapter, we will explore the mysterious walls of Jericho, an impregnable fortress that, according to the Bible, fell in a way that no one has been able to explain until today. Jericho is one of the oldest cities of the world, with a history dating back more than 10,000 years. Located in the current West Bank, its name is linked to one of the most enigmatic episodes of the Bible. According to the story in the book of Joshua, When the Israelites arrived at the city after his exodus from Egypt, they found with walls impregnable that protected the city. But instead of resorting to a military attack, God gave a peculiar instruction: march around the city once a day for 6 days, and in his seventh surround it 7 times, touch the trumpets and shout with all their might. It is incredible that, according to the biblical story, the walls of Jericho collapsed immediately after of the thunderous sound of the trumpets and the cries of the people. The Israelites entered without resistance and took the city. This story has puzzled historians and archaeologists for centuries. How could such a robust defensive structure have fallen without a battle? The excavations in Jericho, they have revealed data surprising. At the beginning of the 20th century, the British archaeologist Kathleen Kenyon discovered remains of a fortified city that had suffered a sudden collapse. Collapsed walls and evidence of a collapse were found great fire, which coincides with the biblical description of the destruction of the city. However, Kenyon said that the dating of these remains did not match with the time in which, according to the Bible, Joshua and the Israelites would have conquered Jericho. Other archaeologists, such as Bryant Wood, have refuted this statement, arguing that the chronology of the findings fits with the biblical story. Beyond from the archaeological debate, various theories have emerged to try to explain the collapse of the walls. Some scientists believe that an earthquake could have been the cause of the collapse, which would have happened just when the Israelites performed their ritual. Others suggest that the vibrations produced by the sound of the trumpets and shouts could have caused a resonance effect in the structure of the walls, weakening them until they collapsed. However, until this day, there is no definitive explanation as to what really happened in Jericho. For the believers, the fall of the walls of Jericho is a testimony of the power of the faith and the divine intervention in the history of Israel. For the skeptics, it is an archaeological enigma that still awaits a clear answer. But this is not the only biblical monument involved in mystery. In the next chapter, we will explore the majestic Temple of Solomon, one of the most amazing constructions of the antiquity, whose greatness still resonates in the history. Among all the buildings mentioned in the Bible, few have aroused as much wonder and mysticism as the Temple of Solomon. This majestic sanctuary, built in Jerusalem on Mount Moriah, was described as the dwelling place of God in the earth and the spiritual center of people of Israel. Their construction, according to the Bible, was ordered by the King Solomon in the 10th century BC and required 7 years of intensive work, with materials that included cedar wood from Lebanon, refined bronze, and enormous quantities of pure gold. The dimensions of the temple were not huge, but their wealth, yes, it was. According to the biblical story, the interior was completely covered in gold, with a Holy of Holies in its center, where it was kept the Ark of the Covenant. Impressive sculptures of cherubs golden guarded this sacred place, and only the high priest was allowed to enter once a year. The Bible describes that when the temple was completed, a divine cloud descended upon it as a sign that God was accepted. But what passed with this wonder architectural? In the year 586 BC, the king Nebuchadnezzar II of Babylon invaded Jerusalem and reduced the temple in ruins. The Babylonians, they plundered their treasures and deported the people Jewish, starting a period of exile. Since then, no direct archaeological evidence has been found of the original temple, although some, they believe that the foundations still lie under the esplanade of the mosques in Jerusalem. Despite his destruction, the legend of Solomon's temple is still alive. Some theorists have linked its wealth to the enigma of the Knights Templar, who, according to certain stories, would have found their hidden treasures centuries later. For others, his legacy lies in the profound influence it exerted on culture and religion, Jewish. However, this is not the only biblical monument surrounded by mystery. In the next chapter, we will explore the Tower of Babel, a construction that attempted to defy the heavens and whose collapse left a mark indelible in the history of the humanity. Among the many enigmatic stories of the Bible, few have generated as much debate as the Tower of Babel. According to the story of the Genesis 11:1-9, all the humanity I was speaking a single language and lived united in the same region. Relying on his own greatness, the men they decided to build a tower that would reach the heavens, a symbol of their ambition and power. But God, seeing his arrogance, decided to punish the humanity, confusing their languages and dispersing them throughout the earth. The construction it remained unfinished, and the city was abandoned. Although the story has a strong religious symbolism, some historians believe that it could have based in a real structure, the ziggurats of Mesopotamia. These enormous stepped constructions were temples dedicated to the gods, and were present in cities such as Babylon, Ur, and Nineveh. In particular, it has been speculated that the Etemenanki, an imposing ziggurat of the ancient Babylon dedicated to the god Marduk, could have been the inspiration behind the history of the Tower of Babel. This temple would have reached a height of more than 90 meters, an architectural feat for the time. But beyond the possible historical basis, the story of the Tower of Babel has been interpreted in many ways. Some they see it as a metaphorical story about the limits of the human ambition and the importance of the humility. Others suggest that it reflects a real event in the history of the humanity, the emergence of different languages and the dispersion of the villages. Curiously, the study's modern linguists suggest that the languages of the world can have originated in a single ancestral language, which makes the myth of Babel even more interesting. It is true that to this day, no direct evidence has been found of the existence of the Tower of Babel, although the references to her have survived in ancient texts and in various cultures. For the believers, it is a warning about the dangers of defying God. For archaeologists, it continues being an unsolved enigma. But the Tower of Babel is not the only construction that marked the biblical history. In the next chapter, we will explore the Second Temple of Jerusalem, a monument of faith that rose from the ashes, only to be destroyed in an event that changed forever the destiny of town Jewish. After the destruction of the Solomon's Temple at the hands of the Babylonians in the year 586 BC, the town Jew was left without its spiritual center. However, decades later, when King Cyrus of Persia allowed the return of the exiles to Jerusalem, began the reconstruction of a new sanctuary, the Second Temple. This new temple, although less majestic than the first, it became in the heart of the identity Jewish and the center of their religious rituals. With time, the structure it was enlarged and embellished, reaching his greatest splendor under the reign of Herod the Great in her 1st century BC. The monarch, known for his ambitious projects architectural, ordered a monumental expansion, reinforcing the walls and adding a colossal esplanade that today we know it as the Esplanade of the Mosques. It is said that the dimensions of the Herodian temple it converted in one of the wonders of the ancient world, with gold-clad facades that sparkled in the sun, but this glory would not last forever. In year 70 AD, after a revolt due against the Roman rule, the Emperor Tito ordered the destruction of the temple. Roman troops looted the city, set on fire his sanctuary, and destroyed almost all of Jerusalem. Only a fragment of the outer wall standing, which today we know as the Wailing Wall, a sacred site for Judaism until today. The end of the Second Temple marked a turning point in the history Jewish. Without its religious center, the town Jew dispersed even more, giving rise to what is known as the Jewish diaspora. For centuries, the reconstruction of the temple has been a longing within the tradition Jewish, and its importance go on being a subject of political and religious controversy in the current events. But the story does not end here. After analyze these impressive biblical constructions, it is time for a final reflection. Were these buildings witnesses of divine miracles, or simply great achievements of the engineering ancient wrapped in sacred stories? That is the question with which we will conclude our investigation. Throughout the history, the humanity have built monuments that defy logic and the reason, but few buildings they have generated as much mystery as those described in the Bible. From Noah's Ark, a boat colossal, supposedly built in primitive times, until the inexplicable walls of Jericho, which fell without a single battle. Since the majestic Temple of Solomon, covered in gold, to the Tower of Babel, symbol of the human ambition, and the Second Temple of Jerusalem, a sanctuary that re-emerged and then disappeared in the flames. The questions continue open. Were these constructions real or simply stories with a symbolic purpose? Can we trust the archaeology to find evidence of its existence, or are there things that we can never explain with certainty? For the believers, these monuments are a sample of divine power and of the God's intervention in the history. For the skeptics, are mythological stories, narratives transmitted through the time with a strong cultural value. It is true that, with or without definitive proof, these stories have endured for millennia, shaping the faith of millions and leaving a mark indelible in the civilization. But now the question is for you. Which of these constructions do you think it really existed? Do you think that the science someday will you be able to solve these puzzles? Or is there mysteries that are destined to remain hidden? Leave us your opinion in the comments and share this video with someone who also wants to discover the truth behind these biblical monuments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notifications to continue exploring the older mysteries of the history. See you in next episode.